My name is Renee Calloway. I am 37 years old. I grew up in a family that loved me the way people love furniture. Present, useful, expected to stay in its assigned place and not make a sound. For 18 years, my mother introduced me as the complicated one. For 18 years after that, she introduced me as the one who does the office work. And then, on an Easter Sunday in April, with a ham on the table and a pastor in the doorway and her smile beginning to freeze in real time, the truth walked through the front door and said my name louder than I ever had.
I did not plan for it to happen that way.
But I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest. I had been ready for it for a very long time. The only question was which room it would happen in. And it happened in hers. Before I go any further, if you're new here, please take a second and subscribe. It genuinely helps. And drop your city and state in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Back to a house in Georgia, a Sunday table that seated 10, and a folding chair that sat just outside the door. The house I grew up in smelled like pine sol and Sunday pot roast. Those two smells have never separated in my memory. One was the smell of a clean surface. The other was the smell of something presented to be admired. It was a 3-bedroom ranch house in Haversham, Georgia. Population around 12,000, depending on the year. White aluminum siding. A carport, not a garage. A backyard with a rusted swing set that stayed up long after anyone used it, the way some things do. Out of inertia, not intention. The living room had carpet the color of old oatmeal and a velvet painting of the Last Supper that had been on the wall since before I was born. It hung slightly crooked. No one ever straightened it. My mother, Claudette, ran that house the way a church committee runs a fundraiser, with total control presented as cheerful generosity. She was the woman other women called so organized. She had a smile, she kept polished for company, and a different expression entirely for the 7 feet between the front door and the kitchen. She was not a cruel woman. That is important to say. She was a woman so afraid of being ordinary that she had built an entire architecture of respectability around herself, and anyone who didn't fit neatly inside it became a structural problem. My older sister, Dana, fit. Dana married at 23, had 2 children by 26, and moved 12 minutes away. She called our mother every morning at 8:15. She had smooth hair and a husband named Philip who coached Little League and laughed at my father's jokes. Dana was the one Claudette described as the one who got it right. Not to Dana's face. To everyone else's face, with Dana standing right there. Dana never corrected her. I did not fit. I was the one who asked too many questions at the dinner table. The one who got into an argument at age 14 with Brother Simmons about whether Noah's Ark was logistically possible and would not back down when asked to. The one who wanted to go to college for something that wasn't nursing or education. Renee does her own thing. My mother used to say, lips pressed thin, to the other women at First Baptist. The way she said it, it sounded like a warning. I remember one Sunday when I was 16. I had been asked to help set the Easter table. I counted the plates, counted the chairs, and set a place for myself at the main table. 11 settings. I had done it carefully. Claudette came in, looked at the table, looked at me, and removed my setting without a word. She replaced it with a small folding card table that lived in the hall closet. She positioned it in the doorway to the dining room, adjacent but separate. She put 2 younger cousins there with me. She said it was because the table was full. The table was not full. There were 2 empty chairs. She added a floral centerpiece to fill one. I sat at the card table and ate my ham and passed the rolls when asked. I watched the candles burning on the main table from 8 feet away and did not say anything. I was 16. I filed it, the way I filed everything. My grandfather Earl Odom was my mother's father, which means he had to have known something about being inside that family and surviving it intact. He was 72 when I left for college and had been retired from the Postal Service for 6 years by then. He wore the same type of shoes every day, black lace-ups, buffed with a shoe kit he kept under the bathroom sink, the kind with a dauber applicator and a rag folded 3 times. He never wore white sneakers. He said white sneakers were for people who weren't planning to walk anywhere important. He was not a man of many words. But the words he selected like tools. He picked each one up, waited, and set it down with intention. I was 12 the first time I sat with Earl at his kitchen table. The one with the contact paper peeling at the left corner, the one that wobbled slightly unless you knew to tilt your coffee cup, and he spread out a 1040 form and said, "Let's see what this says." Not a tax lesson, not instruction, just, "Let's see what this says." We were there for 2 hours. He taught me how to read a form the way you read a face, not for what it tells you, but for what it's trying not to. At the end, he looked up over his reading glasses and said, "Numbers never lie, even when people do." I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time. I thought he was talking about arithmetic. He kept a scrapbook. I didn't know about it until I was 35. It lived in the back of his bedroom closet, behind his winter coats, inside a shoebox with a rubber band around it. Inside, newspaper clippings printed on copy paper. Emails he had asked his granddaughter Kia to help him print at the library. A folded photocopy of my professional license from the Georgia State Board. A small article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution about a non-profit fraud case from 2019. My name was in the third paragraph. He had circled it with a ballpoint pen. He never told me. He never showed anyone. He just kept them. The way people keep things they're proud of, but don't know how to say out loud. The case had been running for 18 months when Easter came around that year. I can't go into all the details, some of it is still under federal seal, but the broad shape is public record. A charity out of Savannah that claimed to fund housing assistance for veterans' families. For $1,200,000. Systematically drained over 3 years through a network of shell invoices and dummy contractors. The families who thought they were receiving help had applied, waited, received confirmation letters, and never seen a dollar. Some of them had moved based on those confirmation letters. I am not going to tell you what happened to them. I am going to tell you that I read those files for 18 months, and I did not sleep well during any of them. My name had not appeared in any press coverage yet. The case was still active. My supervisor, Marcus Webb, had been careful about that. We all had been. You don't name the accountant until the case is closed. You name the accountant when the case is closed and the press statement is ready and everything is in order. That's how it works. My mother knew I worked for a federal contractor. She had not asked more than twice what that meant. When I said forensic accounting, she nodded the way people nod when they want to change the subject. I drove down from Atlanta the Saturday before Easter to help with cooking. I arrived around 6 in the evening. Claudette was on the phone in the bedroom, door not fully closed. I set my bag down and went to the kitchen to start on the deviled eggs, and I heard her voice carrying. "Dana, I told them she works for some accounting office up in Atlanta." A pause. "Well, I just don't want people asking too many questions. You know how Renee gets." Another pause, longer. Then, "I just do not want people thinking I raise someone who puts herself above her family." I stood in the hallway and heard every word. The refrigerator hummed. I could smell the ham in the oven. Through the window above the sink, the porch light was on, and a moth was moving against the glass. I peeled the shells off the eggs. I made the filling. I piped it in with a spoon because I could never find the piping bag in that kitchen. I did not say anything. Not that night. Not the next morning when we drove to church together in her Buick that still smelled like her old perfume, Estee Lauder Beautiful, a smell so specifically hers that I sometimes think grief is just a smell you can't get away from. Not at breakfast when she reminded Dana to sit on the right side of the table so she'd be closer to the pastor if he stopped by. I did not say anything because I did not need to. Claudette had spent 19 years performing a version of herself that required my erasure. She had done it so long and so quietly that she had genuinely forgotten it was a performance. That is what made her, in her way, recognizable. She was not villainous. She was afraid. And fear, when it calcifies, starts to look exactly like contempt. The week before, she had called me to say that the pastor and his wife might drop by Easter Sunday and to please not bring up my work because it confuses people. I told her I would keep that in mind. And I did, the way you keep a detail in mind when you're building a case.
Filed.
Noted. Dated. Marcus had texted me Friday evening. He needed 2 signatures on amended disclosure paperwork before the Monday press briefing. He would be in the area Sunday visiting his wife's family. Was it possible to drop them by? I gave him Claudette's address. I told him any time after 2 was fine. I did not tell Claudette. I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it. Have you ever been in a room with people who had decided, before you walked in, who you were? Have you ever watched someone perform a version of you that they needed to be true, and understood that correcting them would cost more than staying quiet? If you know that feeling, type the word seat in the comments right now. Because what happened next at that Easter table in that dining room is the moment I had been, without realizing it, preparing for since I was 16 years old. The night before Easter, I sat on the porch of Claudette's house at 11:15 p.m. while the house was quiet. The porch light was off. I hadn't turned it on. The yard was dark except for the street lamp at the corner, which cast a pale yellow cone over the edge of the driveway. There was a magnolia tree at the property line that I had climbed once at age 9 and fallen out of, and never climbed again. It was still there. It looked exactly the same. Some things are like that. I had my phone in my hand. I had Marcus's text thread open. I had the amended disclosure pages in my bag, already reviewed. I had what I needed. I am going to be honest about this part because the rest of the story can sound clean in the retelling, and it wasn't clean. Sitting on that porch, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of it. 18 months of a case that I had held together with procedure and precision and silence. 18 years of a family that had handed me a folding chair and called it a seat. A mother who had looked at what I had built with my life and had felt, somehow, diminished by it. That part hurt. It still does. I don't want to pretend it doesn't. I sat there for a long time. The magnolia tree didn't move. The street lamp held its yellow circle. Eventually, I went inside. I was not going to do anything dramatic. I was not going to make a speech. I was not going to confront anyone or correct anyone or prove anything to anyone. I was simply going to be exactly who I was in that room when the moment arrived. I had spent a career understanding that the most devastating thing you can do to a false narrative is to let the truth speak first. I went to sleep. Easter Sunday arrived the way Easter always does in Georgia, too warm for April, with azaleas already blooming outside the church windows and a heaviness in the air that either means rain or just the South being itself. We ate at 2 o'clock. Claudette had set the table beautifully. White linen. The good china, the set with the gold rim, the one that only came out 4 times a year. A centerpiece of white Easter lilies that she had arranged herself. 10 settings at the main table. She handed me the folding chair at the kitchen door, the way you hand someone a coat check ticket. Routine. Without looking up. The table's full, she said. It seated 10. There were 9 people at it. But I took the folding chair and I set it in the hallway where it had always gone, and I sat down. The meal moved forward. Ham, cornbread dressing, sweet potato casserole with the brown sugar crust, green beans with fatback, Dana's potato salad, which was better than Claudette's and which Claudette complimented through precise teeth. The conversation moved through safe territory. Dana's children's school play, the price of everything, a deacon who was ill. I ate my ham. I passed the rolls when asked. At 3:15, the doorbell rang. Claudette rose like she had been expecting it, which she had. She had mentioned, twice, that Pastor Whitfield and his wife Beverly might stop by with a dish. She smoothed the front of her dress. She went to the door with her company's smile already in position. Pastor Whitfield. Beverly. We are so blessed to have you. Beverly was carrying a covered dish. The pastor shook Claudette's hand with both of his. They came inside. I could see them from the hallway. I had a clear sight line from my folding chair. Claudette turned toward the dining room and began the introductions. Her hand swept toward the table. You know my son-in-law Philip, and this is my daughter Dana. And Dana smiled and nodded and was everything she was meant to be, and my grandchildren, Avery and Joss. She paused. Her hand moved slightly in my direction. And that's Renee. She keeps busy with office work up in Atlanta. That was it. That was the whole sentence. Office work. The pastor smiled pleasantly and nodded and was about to say something when the front door, which had not fully closed behind him, opened again. Marcus Webb is 6'2" and carries himself like a man who has testified in federal court 16 times and found it unremarkable. He was wearing a navy blazer and carrying a manila envelope. He had not called ahead. We had agreed he didn't need to. He stepped into the entryway and saw the pastor immediately. Gerald. His voice was warm.
Certain.
The voice of a man who knows he is welcome. I didn't know you'd be here. The pastor turned. His face opened up. Marcus Webb. Lord have mercy. They knew each other. I had known they would. Marcus and Pastor Whitfield had grown up in the same county. This was the part one could not have planned but had not needed to plan, because the truth rarely requires orchestration. It just requires presence. Marcus shook the pastor's hand. He shook Beverly's. He looked around the room with the easy confidence of someone oriented by profession to read every room he enters. His eyes landed on me. He smiled. Then he looked at Claudette. You must be Renee's mother. He extended his hand. Marcus Webb. I work with your daughter. I just need 2 minutes of her time, and then I'll be out of your way.
Claudette shook his hand.
Of course, she said. She works at your accounting office? And Marcus looked at her with a very specific expression of a man who has no idea he is correcting anyone. No performance. No intention. Just the natural, guileless confidence of a person stating a fact. We're with the Attorney General's Fraud Division, he said. I just needed to catch Renee before the Monday briefing. The AG's office is naming her as lead on the public statement. 18 months of work on this veteran's fraud case. She brought the whole thing together. He said it the way you say the weather's been good lately. Like it needed no emphasis. Like it was simply the shape of what was true. The room went quiet. Not sudden quiet. Slow quiet. The kind that falls when everyone in a room recalculates at the same time. The pastor turned toward me. His expression had shifted into something genuine, something that looked like admiration before he'd had the chance to decide whether to show it. Renee. The veterans' charity case? That's been all over the news. Yes, sir, I said. Beverly touched her husband's arm. I looked at my mother. Claudette's smile did not fall. It froze, like something that had been warm and then stopped. Her eyes moved to me, and then moved away, and then came back and didn't know where to go. I did not help her. I excused myself, stepped past the card table, and walked into the entryway with Marcus. He handed me the envelope. I signed where I needed to sign. He said, "See you Monday," and left. I walked back to my folding chair. I sat down. I picked up my fork. I ate the rest of my ham. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Philip asked the pastor about the Sunday sermon, and the pastor answered, and the conversation resumed. And it resumed differently, the way a room is different after a window has been opened, even after the window is closed again. I did not look at my mother for the rest of the meal. I did not need to. So, what do you think happened next? Drop your prediction in the comments. Option A. Claudette apologized before I left that night. Option B. Claudette doubled down and acted like nothing had happened. Option C. Something quieter. Something that took months. Something that neither of us ever named out loud. I'll tell you in a moment. And if you've stayed this long, stay just a little longer. Because what happened after was not what I expected either. It was option C. There was no confrontation that night. Claudette and I washed dishes side by side the way we always had, with the small radio on the windowsill playing a gospel station out of Macon. She handed me things to dry. I dried them. We said what needed to be said about leftovers and driving conditions and the weather for Monday. She did not mention Marcus. She did not mention the case. She did not say my name once in the 40 minutes we spent in that kitchen. What happened instead happened slowly, across weeks and months, the way water damage happens, invisibly at first, and then suddenly all at once. Beverly Whitfield mentioned my name at the next 3 Tuesday morning church circles. Not unkindly, with genuine curiosity, the kind that puts questions in other people's heads. Claudette's daughter, the federal accountant, the one on the veterans case. Can you imagine? Women Claudette had spent 20 years building a reputation in front of began asking questions she could not answer. She would have to say she wasn't sure about the details. She would have to say Renee kept things close to the vest. She would have to perform Pride in real time, without the script she had written, which was harder. Dana called me in June. This was unusual. Dana and I had an arrangement that functioned largely as a performance. We liked each other when our mother needed us to, and ignored each other when she didn't. This call was different. Her voice was careful. "I didn't know," she said. "About your work. All of it." I believed her. That was the complicated thing. Dana had accepted the narrative too, but she had accepted it the way people accept weather, without authorship. She wasn't the architect. She was just someone who had lived inside the house without asking who built it. "I know," I said. "She shouldn't have." Dana started and then stopped. "No," I said. "She shouldn't have." We stayed on the phone for a few minutes. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was an acknowledgement, which, for us, was more valuable. The Thanksgiving following Easter, I drove down to Haversham. I walked into the dining room. There was a place set for me at the main table. No one mentioned the card table. No one explained the change. Claudette just looked up when I came in and said, "Renee, sit there, next to your cousin." She gestured toward the main table. A real chair. Real china. I pulled out the chair and sat down. I did not say anything about it. I understood that saying something would require her to defend the previous 19 years, and she was not capable of that. And this, the silent revision, the unannounced correction, was the closest she could come to honesty. I accepted it for what it was, which was not nothing. It was not an apology. It was more honest than an apology. It was a woman doing the only thing she could bring herself to do, stopping. The conversation between Claudette and me happened in February, 7 months after Easter. She called me on a Sunday afternoon. I was in Atlanta in my reading room with a cup of coffee and a brief I was annotating. She said she'd been thinking. She didn't say about what. She didn't need to. "I want you to know I'm proud of what you do," she said. Her voice had a quality I had not heard in it before, not softness, exactly, but some of the architecture had come down. Some of the scaffolding. I let the silence sit for a moment. "I believe you," I said. And I did. That was the complicated part. I didn't, she stopped. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't understand it. And I think I let that become something else. "Yes," I said. "You did." Another silence. "I'm willing to come home more," I told her, "when I'm coming home as myself. Not as someone you've explained in advance." She didn't answer immediately. I heard her breath on the line. "Okay," she said finally. "That's fair." It was not forgiveness. It was not absolution. It was two people at the edges of a long, real thing, deciding whether to keep standing there. We decided to keep standing. Dana called the week after. She had a conversation with Claudette that she did not give me full details of, and I did not ask for. What she said was, "She's trying." I believed that too. The thing about Earl is he never had a reckoning moment with anyone. He just kept his scrapbook. And one Christmas morning, he took it out of the closet, set it in my lap, and said, "This is yours."
He didn't explain.
He didn't need to. "Numbers never lie," he said, "even when people do." I finally understood what he meant. 1 year after that Easter Sunday, I am sitting in the reading room of a small house in Decatur, just east of Atlanta. The room has floor-to-ceiling shelves that I designed myself, Shaker style, painted the color of aged linen, and a window that faces a Japanese maple in the backyard, which in autumn turns the color of a struck match. The coffee I make in the morning is from Ethiopian single origin I found at a farmer's market 3 weeks ago and have been buying ever since. These are the details of a life I built for myself when I stopped trying to make it legible to people who had chosen not to read it. On the second shelf, to the left of the window, between a case law textbook and a framed photo of me and Earl at his 81st birthday, sits the shoebox with a rubber band around it. Earl gave me the scrapbook at Christmas. I went through it in the car on the drive home. 31 clippings. 11 printed emails. 4 copies of case citations with my name in them. And the photocopy of my professional license, creased at the fold from being carried in his shirt pocket before he put it away. I held that scrapbook in my hands in a gas station parking lot in Forsyth, Georgia, and I did not cry exactly. But I sat there for a long time with the heat running and the windows fogging and the clippings in my lap. I visit Earl every third Sunday. We sit at his kitchen table, the contact paper still peeling at the left corner, and drink his too-strong coffee and talk about the cases I'm allowed to talk about and the ones I'm not. He asks good questions. He always has. I go home for most major holidays now.
Not all of them.
The ones I attend, I arrive in my own car and I leave when I'm ready. Claudette and I exist in a relationship that is imperfect and ongoing and real, which is the only kind that survives. She still doesn't fully understand what I do, but she no longer edits it. That is enough. It is not everything, but it is enough. I have stopped waiting for my mother to see me. I have started seeing myself. I want to talk to you directly for a moment. If you've stayed through this whole story, I think you stayed because some part of it is yours too. A table you were turned away from. A room where someone described you in a way that didn't fit. A version of yourself that the people closest to you refused to read. Here is what I know now. At 37, in a house I chose and a career I built and a life that required no one's permission. The truth does not require an audience. It does not need to be loud. It does not need to be introduced. When it walks through the door, it introduces itself, and no amount of prior narrative survives contact with it. I did not win anything that Easter Sunday. I was simply present when the truth arrived. That is all I had to do. Drop your story in the comments. Tell me about the table you were turned away from, or the moment the truth walked through someone else's door. I want to read it. My name is Renee Calloway. I am 37 years old. I was the woman in the hallway with the folding chair. I am not that woman anymore, but I understand her better than anyone, and I will carry her carefully for the rest of my life. Thank you for watching. Ensure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories coming your way daily.